We've always known that the increase in fuel increases the price of food. But when you look at a 50-litre tank, Leighton, good morning, 250 Rand more now than the same time last year. It's starting to get very significant and starting to hurt the pocket, isn't it?
No, absolutely, Gareth. Good morning to you and your viewers. It absolutely is significant, and I think when you consider that we are a extremely road freight reliant society, in other words, we really do rely on road freight to bring goods up and down our country. That is an enormous input cost for manufacturers and for suppliers. And they're not going to absorb that cost. They're going to pass that cost on to consumers, and that's exactly why we're going to see an increase to certain goods. It is going to filter into the economy. We had record highs of fuel prices in March, in April. They've come down a little in May. We're looking, from 17 Rand 32 in April. We're looking at around 17 in May. It's looking like it may come down a little in June, which is great news. But I think at the moment we're still in an extremely high band, and that for us is very worrying.
It is indeed. And Leighton, I understand we can't go into necessarily the details. We just don't have enough time to go into details about the various levies, the Road Accident Fund. I used to know it as the MVA back in the day. But even though we can't necessarily pay less for fuel, we don't get a say in the matter. Help me understand this general fuel levy, this GFL. Why can't that come down? What does that actually pay for in the cycle of fuel production?
Well, I can't tell you why it can't come down, because it's a part of Treasury's income. They get around 83 billion Rand a year from that levy. I think the big question is if you do away with that levy, where do you actually get that 83 billion Rand from for National Treasury? Now, that money can be used for anything government deems fit. They don't have to use it for anything transport related, even though it's attached to the fuel price. It can be used to build clinics. It can be used to buy school books. It can be used to buy vaccines. It can be used for any purpose the government sees fit. It goes into the coffers, and it's part of that Treasury amount. I think the big question, Gareth, is if you don't have that, where do you get that from? And, does that mean that we have to increase VAT? Does that mean that personal tax gets increased? How do you collect 83 billion Rand? It's an incredibly easy tax to collect for government. People pay it when they fill their cars up. When they put 20 Rands petrol in their vehicle, they're paying a tax on that. I think when you look at something like the RAF levy, we're beginning to see that there's a little bit of wiggle room. In both cases of the levies, we have been asking many questions around how is the money allocated, how is the money utilized, is it being properly managed, what levels of corruption are going around the expenditure of that money, is it being audited properly? So these are the types of things that I think we would like to see, not only for ourselves, but obviously on behalf of all consumers in South Africa.
Is there any numbers to help those watching from a middle income bracket right now, Leighton, help them understand the kind of profitability of petrol stations? Is there wiggle room there for them to bring down their costs? Or what are the kind of costs that they're looking at that could be brought back from affecting the end consumer?
So, Gareth, I'm not a fuel retailing expert, but I know that fuel retailers are themselves under a lot of pressure. I mean, they do have a lot of overheads. They've got to pay for petrol pump attendants. There are expenses to running a fuel station. And, you will speak to people in the industry and they will say that they are reliant a lot of the times on the actual byproducts that they sell, not necessarily the fuel. So, I'm not a fuel expert, but I know that selling fuel is not an easy game to be in. I think we're diverting the attention away from the fact that we have a fuel price. And in our view as the AA, we need to have a look at that fuel price. What is the basic fuel price? Are the numbers that comprise that basic fuel price correct? Is there any wiggle room in terms of calculating the fuel price? Are all the elements that are in that fuel price necessary? Can we take some of them out? Is the RAF levy something that has to be in there? How do we manage the RAF better? Can we privatize the RAF or even semi-privatize it to make it a more efficient organization, to put less reliance on the fuel tax? I think when we look at things like the RAF, Gareth, one of the things that jumps out to us is that is a levy, or that is an organization, the RAF, that compensates victims of car crashes. Now, we are looking at that saying, but why don't we reduce the number of car crashes to reduce the reliance of the public on the RAF? Where are the education programs to reduce the reliance on the RAF through saying, well, let's bring the number of crashes and fatalities down? That's where we have a base problem. That's where we need to be focusing our attention. If we bring down the number of crashes in South Africa, we can bring down the reliance on the RAF, and that will have an impact on the fuel price down the line.
And that will then have an effect on the cost of food, etc., etc. Leighton Beard making wonderful sense for us this morning as to where this money is going. And as he puts forward some fantastic suggestions, we need to have conversations around the RAF to try and pull that money down so it doesn't translate into our wallets every time we fill our cars up. Always a pleasure to have AA spokesperson Leighton Beard